Welcome to Bay Focus. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so privileged to come into your home each week and share what's going on here throughout Central Florida and what God is doing and how the gospel's getting out in unique and creative ways into our community. Well, periodically on the show we highlight churches as well because so many of them are doing the work out in the community. One of those today that we're going to be highlighting is Calvary Church in Clearwater, and it's been actually about a year, and there's all kinds of changes going on over there. And we have the pastor with us today to share with us, and I'll introduce you to him in just a moment. And then we're also going to go to Capernaum Ministries in the Lake Wales area, and this is a retreat for pastors. So we're kind of have a church focus today on the show, but we're going to start today talking about Calvary Church. And before we talk to the pastor, let's take a look at the church, Calvary Church in Clearwater. Now that gives you just a little bit of a look at Calvary Church, what an awesome church it is, and a long time historical significance here in the Clearwater area. And we have with us the senior pastor of Calvary Church, Dr. William Rice, with us. Thank you so much for coming today on Bay Focus. Great to have you.
It's good to be back, Darlene.
It's been, I can't believe it, but it's been almost a year since we've had you this time of year. And it's just always an honor to have you. But this church is a historical church, been in the Clearwater area for 150 years. I don't think you've been the pastor quite that long.
No, not quite that long.
No.
But,
you've been there for, I think, 10 years now, right?
Yeah, just this fall will be 11 years.
Yeah,
Last year we celebrated our 10th anniversary and grew up there a little bit. So
Yes,
I have a history
did.
of the church. And
yeah, and you came, and they brought you back. Okay, give us, for people that may not be familiar with Calvary Church, this is one church, two locations. Give us some of the specifics about the location, service times, what you guys do.
Well, for the last 10 years, our major campus, our main campus has been in East Clearwater at Drew and McMullen Booth. And then a few years ago, we started our second campus up in the East Lake area, right next to East Lake High School. Same road, just about 10, 11 miles north. And so we've actually been functioning on two campuses there and have two services on each campus.
Mm-hmm. And then one of the things you're really known for too is Calvary Christian High School.
It has really grown,
wow.
And it has been an exciting ministry.
Yes.
In just the last few years, it has grown to be the largest. In fact, today is, when we're taping this, the first day of school. Yeah. So this week, they're just getting started here in August, and it'll be the largest student body that we've ever had. Over 400, about 470 students, depending on how many show up today. Yeah. And it has just grown. It's the largest evangelical Christian high school in the Tampa Bay area, and one of the largest in Florida. And so it's a really unique ministry, because it's a high school, but we're really seeing God do great things through that
tremendous
ministry.
reputation in the community. Beautiful location. I mean, the main campus, particularly McMullen Booth Road, right? You're often, like you just told us, and it's just become this big campus. Actually, it's just an incredible thing. Which before we're going to talk to you in just a moment and talk about the expansion, because you're growing and things are happening. But one of the reasons I brought you on too is. I love highlighting churches that are doing some different things out in the community. And you've developed, you're involved in a lot of different outreaches, including missions, and I'm going to let you tell all that. But you've developed partnership with public school, too.
Well, about this time of year, schools get back in, you think about that. And I think it's very important, Darlene, for churches not just to invite people to their service, but to start serving their community. And when you build bridges to people who are outside the church, that gives you an opportunity to build those relationships. The gospel is going to flow over those relational bridges. So we are always looking for ways to get our people outside the church and engaged in practical needs in the community. One of the ways that we've found that really works well, I think other churches can do this, and I'm sure many are, is just helping by adopting public schools in our area. And there are several of them in really critical areas of need. And we had a school right down the road from us, just down the road, that had a real high, it was a school that qualified for a certain level of federal funding because of the poverty level of many of the students in that area. And so we just got engaged there in terms of adopting classes, in terms of providing food and meals for a lot of students in that school that were actually homeless, and mentoring kids. Our members go in and read and mentor after school. And so it's been a great partnership. We've just tried to make a positive difference in a public school.
I absolutely love that. I didn't know a church could go in and adopt a classroom. I love that.
Last couple of years, we've adopted every classroom, and it's a small cost, but it literally means the teachers need certain things, and we provide that, and our people do that. We're able to simply make them aware of the need, and they kind of jump in and become the people who go and serve, and it's just a way of serving.
Yeah.
We tell people we always have an agenda. Our agenda is we want everybody to know about God and His love, but we serve with no strings attached, and that's different. We don't serve you, because we want to make you listen to us or we're trying to force anything on you. We serve because serving is right. Yeah. We want to meet a need because there's a need to be met. But here's what we know. When you build those relationships, people are going to see, and you're going to have the opportunity to build strategic relationships and make an impact if you just serve and meet needs.
Yeah, I love that. That's just so much what the church needs to be about. Okay, there's been some changes in the last year, and while we're talking, because a year ago we actually showed architect drawings of what this expansion on the show is going to be. Well, Calvary Christian High School and the church, it's all kind of been together in an expansion and a new education wing. So we're going to show this on screen while you're telling us about it. What's all happened?
Well, as I said, our school has grown just exponentially. And so a couple of years ago, we realized we were really at a cap in what we were able to do in terms of a high school. And so we sat down. Calvary Christian High School is a ministry, underneath Calvary Church, and so we began to look at what they needed to grow. So this new Christian Education Center adds a number of new classes. It adds a band room, choir room, and art room, a lot of new instructional classes with the latest technology, and it also it just fit right into our building, created a new lobby space for people to come in, a new entrance area. So it benefits both the church and the school, and it allows our school to grow. We think with this new facility, our school can grow to between 500 and 600 students. And so gives us that added capacity, and we're real excited about it.
Well, we're seeing, some of these pictures that we're seeing right now, the whole process of how it took. How long was this going on?
It took about a year. We broke ground just about this time last year. And our goal was to get done in the summer of 2015 before school started. And we did it. We were able to get in there. Really, we were in there in July, and then the first part of August, we had a formal dedication. And you're looking at some of the lobby space that people walk through into the church, and they're the outside of the building.
It's added a whole new entrance, right?
It's added a whole new entrance.
Yeah, what you're seeing right there. If you go by the property, you really see this, and this is gorgeous. There's a whole cafe, too, now, right? You have like a
You know, what we've learned is that lobby space is really the living room for the church. It's where people hang out. It's where they have coffee. It's where they have conversations. Sometimes they're having Bible studies in there. So it just creates that venue before and after church, and it's a great space.
Yeah, and some of what we're seeing right now are the classrooms you were talking about. Now, Calvary Christian High School, would you say your students there, the student body, they've gone on as well to universities, colleges?
They go to some of the finest universities in America. It's really designed to be a college preparatory school.
Yeah.
So we do education at a high level. You kind of have to choose what your focus is, and that's what we do. Is we provide a college preparatory education, but in a solidly Christian environment. We teach from a Christian worldview, and so the academics are rigorous, but it's a great program, great student life, athletics, arts, the whole gamut, and we're just really pleased with we're humbled by what God has done through it. There are students there from all kinds of churches, Darlene. It's not just a school for kids from Calvary. To have a great Christian high school, it really has to be a church-wide, and by church-wide I mean multiple churches, crossing denominational lines. So we have students from multiple churches, different denominational backgrounds, but they want to be in, their families want them to be in a Christian environment where we're teaching from a Christian worldview.
Yeah, well, that's a great plug for the school and a great, example of it. Now, I don't know that we'll have time. We actually do have a video of the school and some of the students and everything, but I want to ask you a few things, and if we have time to go back to it, we will.
Absolutely.
But I want to make sure we don't run out of time, because I have a topic I really want to ask you about. You made a trip to Cuba this year. We've seen Cuba in the news, and obviously our embassy, the U.S. government's reopened the embassy after 50 years or something. I mean, it's been unbelievable to see relations, and different sides of the map on that. Some are for that, some are against that. But you have a whole different take, because you went in there for ministry. Tell us what this trip was and what you saw.
Well, it was my second trip to Cuba. Our church is involved in a wide array of international projects. But this past spring, we went into Cuba. I was able to go along actually with the president of the Southern Baptist Convention, Dr. Ronnie Floyd, who's a friend. He took a small contingency of leaders into Cuba, and it just blew me away. What God is doing in Cuba. I'll let other people argue about the politics, but I want you to know God is building the church in Cuba. And what we have seen happen in Cuba is truly a church planting movement. Now, we've read about that in America. We talk about it. It's happening in Cuba. And there are a number of numbers I can rattle off, but from 1960 to 1990, the church in Cuba, these are Baptist churches, went from 200 to 238. So we added 38 churches about 30 years. In the next 3 years, they added 38 more. In just 3 years, they did what they had done in 30. But since 1993 to today, about a 20-year window, we've gone from 238 churches to over 1,050 churches.
Wow.
But that's not counting the mission churches, which are like satellites. There's another about 1,500 of those. And then that's not counting the house churches, because the government kept forcing them to decentralize. It wouldn't let them build buildings.
That's what I was going to ask you. How does the government do that?
Well, it's one of those things that God uses. What man means, for evil, God uses for good. And the government won't let the churches build larger buildings. They said, well, can't you meet in your homes? And so all of a sudden, they began to meet in homes. And they began to multiply. There are now, and this is just numbers of Baptist churches. I'm not counting in the charismatic movements and other evangelicals, which are experiencing similar growth. We've gone from 238 churches to, if you count the house churches and the mission churches, there's over 8,000 churches. It is a true explosion of evangelical Christianity going on in Cuba. And so God is at work. God is at work.
Awesome.
God doesn't need the government to work. And God will use even things that others mean for evil. God has a way of using that to accomplish His purpose. That's why the gospel is exploding in China. It's exploding in Cuba. And sometimes the church does its best
in persecution
when it has hard times.
And you actually experienced the services there. They were different, weren't they? I mean, I heard you talk about it one time, that you could not get over how they would just stay and stay in the presence.
This was a missions conference, actually. There were leaders from all across the island. Some of them had driven on buses packed. We we would never ride in a bus like this. I mean, people were packed in like cargo. But they rode, some of them, 24, 30 hours to be at this missions conference. They sat on hard, uncomfortable benches. They'd start at 7:30 in the morning, and we'd be going strong 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And this was a conference where their leaders were gathering. They were actually entering a new era where now they're sending missionaries out from Cuba into other countries. And the response of people who wanted to go, who are willing to go, was just amazing. Yeah. So it blessed my heart to see what God is doing in places like that, and we have much to learn. You go down to Cuba, if you think that we're going to teach them how to do church, I want to tell you, the one thing we have that they don't have is money. That's it. Yeah. But there is fervency, there's passion, there's a commitment to holiness, gospel preaching, evangelism, discipleship. God is working in a great way in the island of Cuba.
Yeah, there's a hunger for the Lord, clearly.
There's a hunger for the Lord.
I just wanted you to be able to speak to that, because I don't think a lot of us know that here in the States, how vibrant the church is there. Yeah. I mean, I would never have thought that. I would have thought they've been hiding out somewhere doing something, but to have these kind of gatherings, to be able to come and...
They have to work within parameters and constraints, and they've learned to do that. It's kind of an uneasy tension, but they've learned to do that. Yeah. And their prayer is not really about the government. If you gather with Cuban leaders, they say, please don't pray about the government. Don't pray for more freedom, more liberty. And we might have a hard problem. Yeah. We might go, well, we want to pray for that. But they just say, pray for us to have boldness in preaching the gospel and for the church to continue to grow.
Which leads me to my next question. I don't think we're going to get to this other video, because I have to ask you this. This leads me, because when you think of the church flourishing in a environment there that has been hostile to it at times. America has been going through a really rough time here from a Christian perspective, from a religious freedom perspective, from our culture. How does the church now respond to the cultural shift in America? We obviously saw Supreme Court rulings come down actually against traditional marriage or for same-sex marriage. We've seen other culture shifts. That's not the only issue. There's been all kinds of social issues that have swung to the left more so, to where all of a sudden it's beginning to feel like Christians are under attack, are definitely in the minority, and that's what you feel like. I mean, there may be a lot of silent ones out there. You're afraid to speak out. Yeah. How does the church respond to this? There's
no question there's been a shift. I mean, it's almost beyond obvious to say we're in a post-Christian era. Of course we are. We are in an era where there really is a growing hostility toward people of religious faith in general, but the Christian faith in particular. I think we need a shift in mindset, though. I think so many of us grew up in an era of God and country. Yes. That we really associated, Christians in America, even if we didn't say it, and sometimes we did say it, we associated America with the kingdom of God. Those are two different things. Yeah. Now, I love America. I'm patriotic just as you are, and we ought to be. Yeah. But there's a great line from Russell Moore's new book, Onward, who is a wonderful author. We're Americans best when we're not Americans first. Our first responsibility isn't to pray for America. It is to pray, Jesus taught us to pray, for the kingdom to come on earth as it is in heaven. It is God's kingdom that lasts forever, not the American kingdom. And we need a shift in thinking. We need to love our country. But our focus needs to be the gospel. It needs to be preaching the gospel, winning people to Christ, discipling people. And listen, I'm for involvement in politics. I encourage Christians to be involved in politics, but we are way beyond a political solution. We need spiritual renewal, and we need churches not to believe that through politics they're going to recapture America. That isn't going to happen. Yeah. It's going to be through the preaching of the gospel, discipling people, winning people to Christ, that we begin to build the kingdom of God, and we'll see what happens with America.
And we were actually talking about this before we started doing the program. I remember growing up in the 60s. Okay, totally dates me. I was a child in the 60s, but I remember the whole cultural revolution then, the Woodstock. I remember when the Beatles hit America. I remember the riots. I actually grew up in the Detroit. I was from Detroit, and Detroit riots. I remember some things that happened at the Democratic Convention in 1968, the protests, all these things. 60s were turbulent. The Vietnam War, turbulent. And 70s slowly started coming out of it. By the 80s, things were switching back to a more conservative approach and things, family values things. But in the middle of all that happened the Jesus movement. The Jesus, where hippies began to come to the Lord. It started out in California, I remember it. A lot of your contemporary Christian music was birthed out of that.
It was birthed out of that movement.
Stuff we're singing today.
Absolutely.
And I'm going, that's an example where the church can rise up in the middle of culture and make a difference.
And that wasn't a political movement at all. That was a countercultural movement.
Yeah.
And it really hit early in the 70s.
Yeah.
And that's the closest thing to a revival that many in this generation have ever seen, is that Jesus movement. Jesus was on the cover of Time magazine, Man of the Year.
Yes.
We can see God can do great things, and we know that. What we need is for the church in America to wake up and get back to being the church. And we don't need to be the moral majority. We need to be the prophetic minority. God doesn't need a majority. He just needs our churches to be faithful, to preach the gospel, and to win people and advance the kingdom of God, and to do it courageously, even though we are now the outcast in this society. But it is a great time to follow Christ.
Well, that's great. Pastor, I wanted to end on our interview time on that because it's so powerful, and you have spoken to this. And as a leading pastor of one of our leading churches here in Tampa Bay, we really, our pastors need to address this. They need to talk to the people. How do we do this? What do we do? How do we function now? Thank you so much for being on the show. You're going to stay with me and close out the show with me in a few minutes, so we're not done yet. But stay tuned for more of Bay Focus. We're going to show you how you can contact Calvary Church right now, and we'll be right back.
Calvary Church has 2 locations. To contact the church office, please call 727-441-1581 or send an email to info@calvary.us. You can find out more about the church and watch services streamed live at calvary.us. You can also connect with Calvary Church on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and other social media sites.
I'm sure you've heard the saying, "You are what you eat," and many can vouch that this is a very true statement. Proverbs 27:19 talks about a similar comparison, which goes, "As water reflects a face, so a man's heart reflects the man." And just like what you put inside your physical body reflects the body, what you put inside your spiritual body reflects the heart. Putting the Word of God daily inside of you and having that personal relationship with Him is key. The Bible talks about that out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. What are you speaking today?
Well, we're kind of continuing our theme now, talking about pastors and things available, churches here in the area, but there's a great ministry in the Lake Wales area called Capernaum Ministries, Capernaum Ministries, and Brooke Larson is here to tell us all about it. Let's take a look.
Seen to many as a peaceful and quiet getaway, Capernaum Inn and Ministries is a place of rest for the fisher of men. Located in Lake Wales on a pristine property, Capernaum Inn includes 8 fully furnished cabins, boating, a fishing pond, and so much more. Jim Way, president of Capernaum Inn and Ministries, saw a demand for a place of restoration for pastors.
We lose 1,500 pastors a month or more every year. 4,000 to 6,000 churches close their doors every year in America. We have less people going to church per capita today than in the history of America. There's a lot of strain and struggle and hurt, and pastors need a place to recover that's reasonable.
There's not too many people that we can talk to and really share our heart with, because we are supposed to be superhuman. We're supposed to be the one to, hey, take on all the burden, give all the good advice, and then yet not having the burden ourselves. And so when I came to Capernaum, I look at Capernaum, I call it Capernaum 4R: restore, refresh, renew, and rebuild.
It's kind of like, in boxing, if you will. There are 3 rounds, or 3-minute rounds, and of course, and they go in, they box hard for those 3 minutes, and then they have 1 minute to go to their corner, where they are ministered to and nurtured, by their corner people to get them ready for the next 3 minutes round. And so this served as one of those 1-minute rounds, if you will, after having gone toe-to-toe in a 3-minute round situation in ministry. You just cannot continue to go wide open all the time. You got to have a place of rest and relaxation, and even Jesus spoke of that, you know, said, you've been involved a lot, you need to come away and rest a while.
As a preacher's kid and as a pastor's wife, I can tell you that those guys are under a tremendous amount of pressure. And people don't really realize or appreciate how much is being expected of them with very little compensation, recognition, or support. So the fact that Capernaum ministers to those needs so effectively, I think is critical, not only to a community, but to our society at large.
Capernaum ministers to people in other ways beyond just being a retreat center. They have programs for youth in schools, Christian businesses, and pastors' conferences.
This is the launching pad. This was the starting point for us to be able to go out into the city to really begin to transform the city.
The value of Capernaum and Jim here was the building of the relationships between the local church leaders, that out of those relationships birthed the opportunities that we see for God to move through the church to begin to have an influence on society. Instead of society influencing the church influencing the society.
Capernaum also offers fully equipped RV sites, meeting rooms, and a prayer garden and prayer walk, all for the purposes of having a peaceful and quiet retreat.
There's no other facility like this that I know of in Lake Wales, and I think it's not only important for Lake Wales, but for the greater Tampa area and the Orlando area, for pastors in these large metropolitan areas to get away to a quiet setting, to get on the shores of the lake, or even to get out on the boat with Jim on the lake, and just to have a place of rest and refuge.
Wherever you go on it, the prayer walk, the garden, just walking around, you can feel him here. Just standing out by the lake, you can just feel him just touch you and just love you. And everyone leaves with that feeling.
Be sure to go online at CapernaumMinistries.com to reserve a cabin for you and your family. Reporting for Bay Focus, I'm Brooke Larson.
What an awesome retreat for pastors. You know, many times pastors have a hard time just getting away and fellowship with other pastors. You know, it's kind of a lonely spot. You know, Pastor, I don't know how you feel about that, Pastor Rice, but sometimes pastors need to have the fellowship of other pastors.
Well, they really do. Isolation is one of the great killers in ministry.
Yeah.
Guys are isolated, alone. They don't have anybody to connect with or relate to. So ministries like that are tremendous.
Yeah, I knew you would enjoy that. All right, in a few seconds we have left, tell our viewers again how they can get to Calvary Church location and service times in particular.
Calvary.us, our website, best way to learn about our church. And the Clearwater campus, Drew and McMullen, 2 services, 9:15 and 11 on Sunday morning. East Lake campus up north on East Lake Road next to East Lake High School. And the services are 9:30 and 11 at our East Lake campus.
We're going to end on that.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Pastor. We will see you next week on Bay Focus. May God richly bless you.